We photographed this art using a copy stand. Now, let's edit it in Photoshop. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Visual Center. I'm Carlos and today we're jumping into Photoshop. Now there are a couple of things we need to consider in preparation. First, I need to protect my original file. Lightroom was nice because while I was editing in Lightroom, it never affected the original file. Photoshop, however, works the other way. The original file is going to be open, so I need to take steps to protect it. And I'll show you that when we get into the program. Another thing I like to use when I'm in Photoshop is a Wacom tablet, which helps me be a little bit more precise with the edits that I make. This gives me a stylus pen and I can draw the effects rather than using little mouse clicks. Okay, let's get into it. So I have Photoshop open here and I have my RAW file ready to open, and if I click open, it's going to automatically open into Adobe Camera RAW, and that's where I want to start. Now hopefully you shot in RAW for the highest quality image to work with. However, if you shot in JPEG, you can still work in Camera RAW, and I'll show you how to do that. Let me go ahead and click open. And here you can see the file is now open in Camera RAW. Now if you had a JPEG, it won't open up in this automatically. You'll need to open it. So I'm going to go ahead and click open, just so I can show you how to open your JPEG in Camera RAW. So if you have a JPEG, it'll open up like this. You just need to go to Filter, Camera RAW Filter. And that'll open up in this Camera RAW window. Now the first thing I want to work on here in Camera RAW is the keystoning distortion that I have going on here. You can see that there's a bit of a slant going down here, and this is just the imperfection in the copy stand and the way the camera is mounted on there. But I can easily fix that here in Camera RAW. And for that, I'm going to scroll down here to Geometry. And here in Geometry, we have a similar tool that we had in Lightroom. This one right here, the Guided Upright tool. So if I click on that, what I can do now is go out to the image, and what I want to do is draw a line in line with the painting, or the edge of the painting. So I'm going to click on the edge here, and I'm going to click and drag, and try to keep that line in line with the painting. And I need to adjust that a little bit, so I'll just grab that circle. There we go. What I want to do is do the same thing on the parallel edge. So click and drag. Again, if you're not perfect, you can grab these little circles and make your adjustments. Okay, and already it's starting to adjust the image. Okay, and then I just do that again on the perpendicular lines. So that first point was not perfect, so I can come back and adjust that. And then I'll do the same on this side. Now, sometimes when the artist creates these boards, they may not be cut perfectly, so it's always important to go through and measure the painting that you're photographing to make sure that it is perfectly square. Now I did go ahead and measure this one, and this one is perfectly square, so this one's ready to go. If you do work with a painting that's not perfectly square, you don't want to put these straightening lines on the edges because you're going to end up warping the original painting. What you can do is use these guided lines on the board. So you make sure that you lay down the painting in line with these guided squares, and then you can use the Guided Upright tool to put the measurements on there and straighten it from the baseboard. But now that I have my guides here set up and it's fixed my keystoning distortion, if I turn this off and on, you can see the difference that makes, and it's straightened my painting. And I can make fine-tune adjustments just to make sure that it's just perfect. Now that my keystoning distortion is fixed, I don't need this excess space from the platform, so I'm going to go ahead and crop my image. So I'm going to click OK. So I'm going to go to my crop tool here, and when you're in the crop tool up here at the top, you have this option that says ratio. And you can grab the edges of the crop tool and just kind of eyeball it. That's one way, but if you want to be a little bit more precise with this, I like to type in the actual ratio of the original painting. That way I'm not altering the original dimensions. Now I went ahead and measured this painting. You don't need to do the math. All you need to do is measure your painting, and then you can type in that measurement here in the ratio. I know that this one is exactly 11 by 14. So I'm going to go 11 width, 14 height, and hit enter. Okay, so now when I move the crop tool, it's going to keep that 11 by 14 ratio. Okay, so now I can just move these in towards the edges. And you can use Command plus and Command minus to zoom in and out. Holding the space bar to click and drag to navigate. Just so I can make sure that I'm right on the edges, maybe in just a millimeter or so. Just to make sure that I'm covering everything. I kind of don't want the rough edges of the board, so I'm just going to come in just a little bit. And there, we'll accept that. So we'll hit the check mark and we'll zoom out. And there's our painting. Now you'll notice that the painting is upside down. When it was on the copy stand, technically we photographed it upside down, so I do need to correct for that. So image rotation, 180 degrees. There we go. Now the next thing I want to do is to touch up the image. Get rid of any dust particles that may be there, or any blemishes or scratches. If there's any imperfections in the painting, again, you'll want to have a discussion with the artist. If it's not you, do you need to remove those? Sometimes they like the imperfections that they had in their painting, and so they don't want you to correct those. So make sure you have that conversation with the artist. But I'm going to zoom in here to 100%. I'm going to hit Command Option, Command Alt on Windows, and 0. That's going to zoom me into 100%. And again, I'll use the space bar and I'll click and drag to zoom around. And it looks like there are a couple of dust particles here that got onto the painting while I was photographing. And I can clean those up. Okay, so at the beginning of the video, I talked about how we need to protect this image. So it's important not to do the editing right on this layer in Photoshop. That's the original photo, so we want to protect that one. So I'm going to create a new layer, new empty layer, and I'm going to start with the spot healing brush. Okay, and the spot healing brush has this content aware algorithm built into it, and so you're going to paint in black, and then Photoshop is going to look at the pixels outside of that black area and try to blend them into the black area. Okay. But because we're on this blank layer, there's nothing to sample from, so we need to make sure that we check sample all layers. Okay, and that will allow me, if I zoom in just a little bit more here, I can go ahead and paint right on these blemishes or these dust marks here, and they just kind of disappear. And if I turn the main layer off, you can see that Photoshop is just putting new pixels onto this top layer here. And I can turn this off and on. You can see that the original is not being altered. I just have everything on this blank layer. So if we scroll around the image and look for more dust spots, this is where the pen tablet comes in handy. I can be really precise. Now, this can take several hours depending on the size of your painting and how much dust or scratches or blemishes are on your painting. So I'm going to go ahead and speed through it here. Okay, now I've touched up the image. The next thing I want to do is to make color corrections. And for that, I'm actually going to go back into Camera RAW. However, before I open up Camera RAW, if I do that right now, I have layer 1 selected. If I do that, and I go into Camera RAW, you'll notice that it brings up that layer with all the dust specks on it. That's not what I want to do. So I need to hit cancel on that. What I need to do is create a merged layer of these two, because if I open up this one, it's just going to open up this one, and I'll be color correcting just this layer and not the blemishes that I corrected here on top. And so there might be a discoloration between the blemish touch-ups and the original painting. So I need to create a merged copy of this. I don't want to merge this because then I'll be altering the original photo. I want to protect that. So I'm going to do Command Option Shift E, and that's going to create it's going to copy these two layers and merge them and create a new copy on top of everything. So now I can hit Filter, Camera RAW Filter, and I can make a color adjustments on top of this layer. Okay. Now I like doing this in Camera RAW because I like the controls that it gives me here, very similar to Lightroom's controls. And they can be a little bit more easy to work with than some of the other tools in Photoshop. So I'm going to grab the original painting and use this as reference and try to match what I see here on the painting with the screen. And first thing that I'm noticing is that everything seems to be a little bit saturated on this image. It's not quite as saturated as the original painting. So I'm going to bring down the saturation a bit. And I might even bring my exposure down a little bit, just because everything seems a bit darker here. And it's going to feel a little bit darker just because the screen is backlit. But it just feels a little too bright from the original. So I'm just going to bring that down just a touch. And that's feeling good. I'm going to bring the vibrance down a little bit, just because everything is very muted on this painting. I want to kind of bring that out in the file. Maybe bring the saturation up back just a little bit. And there, that's something close I can start with. Okay, I'm going to go down to the color mixer here and work with my HSL. See if I can make some of these greens maybe a little bit darker. So I'm going to go to luminance and grab my greens. Now if I go like this, I can see which areas it's going to affect. And mostly I'm trying to get the background, so it looks like that might be aqua. Yeah. So I need to bring my aqua down a little bit, make that a little bit darker. And maybe mess with the saturation. Now this is another step that can take easily, an hour or so, fine-tuning it and getting it just right. So I'm going to work with this color mixer a lot, and so I'm just going to speed through this spot, and you can see me just messing with the different colors. And there, I think that's good. I think we've dialed in the color. Set that painting aside. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Okay, and the next thing that I'll want to do is to add some sharpening to the image, just to bring out some of the details and make it just a little bit nicer looking. If I zoom in here, Command Option 0 again to zoom into 100%, I can take a look while I do this. Now for this step, I've actually built an action for myself, and I'll show you that just so you can see what the effect looks like first, and then I'll show you what steps the action is actually taking in Photoshop. So I come here and I have this action here called sharpen, and I can apply that. And you can see that if I go back in my history here, this is adding a bit of sharpening. Now it does change the contrast a little bit, and usually I'm okay with what it does, but you do want to keep an eye on that. If it does change the contrast more than what you would like, then you need to make some adjustments. Okay. And just to show you what that's actually doing, I'm going to undo that and just do it manually. What I'm using is the unsharp filter. So I'm going to go to Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. Now I like to do this in 2 passes, and there are some specific numbers that I punch in for each of these, and that's what I'm going to do here. But just know that if you need to adjust your sharpening a little bit, because this can change from image to image, you might want to tweak these numbers just a little bit. So on this first one, I'm going to type in 100, and then for radius, I'm going to set that to 1.4. I'll leave threshold at 0. And I'm going to click OK. So that'll be my first pass, and then my second one, Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. Second one, I'm going to set this to 20, and my radius I'm going to set to 60. And again, my threshold will be 0, so we'll click OK. And if I zoom in here, you can see it did the same thing that my action did. So I basically just recorded those steps and built an action. If you're interested in that, let me know in the comments below, and I'll make a video on how to make an action. But that's my sharpening, and that's usually the last step that I'll do before I send this off to the artist. So I'm going to save my file, and that is how you edit copywork in Photoshop. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, you can click the like button to help others find it, and you can share it with your friends. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, click that bell for notifications, and we'll see you next time. The sound of one hand clapping. So if you have a JPEG,